worry. Turned out, when he died, he had 32 credit cards. And you know, when you see that, you do wonder, I mean, what is life about today within our capitalist system? And I would want to distinguish, I think, the whole sort of postmodernist culture, the zeitgeist and so on, from the system, because I can see the system having very different kind of philosophies which imbue it, and very different kind of people.
But Brian, I'm not going to let you get away with that, because the capitalist system, you can have different capitalist systems, but don't you think the capitalist system to some extent requires the creation of desires and the creation of the credit to feed those, to give people the means to feed those desires? And where it's sort of it doesn't quite seem to be working. Typically, for example, today, Germany, where people just simply are, everyone says they're not consuming enough, they're saving too much, they're not spending enough. God, you can't, they don't even have credit cards, they only have debit cards, and that's so stupid because everyone's going to, don't they see that how clever we are in America and the UK? It's not a sort of contingent part of the system. The economic success that we talk about here relies on all the things that you're saying you would rather put aside. The over-borrowing and the debt problem. The system relies on there being a lot of us borrowing money. And if you've got a lot of people borrowing money, you're going to have 3 million people who can't repay it. And you can't sort of have it both ways, can you?
Well, first of all, with the 3 million people, I think at present that we have a rather loose regulatory system for subprime lenders in Britain. And we could certainly do a lot more to deal with that issue. Secondly, let's take, you say that in a sense it's the artificial creation of desire and so on. Well, you know, I use an electric shaver. I prefer to use an electric shaver than wet shaving. Our kitchen at home, it's a bit like a factory. You know, there are a whole lot of different gadgets in the kitchen. But, you know, we like that. I mean, I would say that to me, that is sort of progress. I sit on the board of a company in America called ServiceMaster, and one man who's been on the board for the last 12 years with me was the chief operating officer of Walmart, which is now the largest company in the world. And, you know, it started in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, in a place called Bentonville, with this man who said, why can't people who live in the country have the same sort of prices as people who live in the cities? And he said, you know, let's get a store, let's pile things high in the store, and let's go for the lowest prices. And this man on the board, he's the only man on the board who asked the following question. How as a company, he says, can we reduce our prices? Now, I think that's a great question to be asking, because you're asking, how can we help the poor? Or the least disadvantaged? I don't see that as materialism ever. I see that as, I mean, if you read Sam Walton's autobiography, you know, he was really public-spirited, and he made a fortune.
Okay. What I really want to do, because I haven't dominated and I've let them dominate even more, I'd really like to take 2 or 3 comments or questions from the floor, because it's opening up a bit. So we'll take the gentleman here with the first, then we'll take the guy in the row behind. So you 2 go first. Let's take the mic, so make sure everything is. Tell us who you are.
Okay, yeah, my name is Momtaz Ayub. I used to work in investment banking, but I found that was affecting my quality of life, so I'm now a teacher. I wanted to comment on something that Brian mentioned about how this system resists shocks, but of course we don't have an alternative, for instance, Islamic-based system, which perhaps would be better at resisting shocks. And I would argue that perhaps our current system is quite susceptible to speculation and various things that are not based upon the real economy, and hence, you know, as they say, when, you know, America sneezes and the effects it has on the whole economy and so forth. But I had a question for Tariq, which is related to wealth, because wealth, generally speaking, over time it decays. If we have any kind of product or any good, over time it will decay and its value will decrease. Businesses sometimes fail, but interest always increases, and it's kind of inexorable, and it always goes higher and higher. Whereas it seems to me that the reality of the economy is different to that. So does that not have an effect on society as a whole? Could you perhaps comment on that?
I'm going to hold that thought. I'm going to go straight to the guy very behind. Yep. Go ahead.